Bow drill is a method of friction fire starting, which is literally rubbing two sticks together to make fire. I've developed some training wheels for bow drill that I would like to share with you. So before you get crazy and try to make your kit outside, go to a hardware store, and that's where it all starts.
My name is Laura Zara.
Keep on face.
I'm a survival and backcountry specialist.
Don't fall into that trap.
We just got chased down the mountain by a very angry swarm of bees.
I have a hard time explaining what I do and what my life looks like,
But it's way easier to just show you.
Javelin of another elk to get the ivory out. It's just not the best spot to be.
learn what it takes to become decivilized.
If you have ever tried the bow drill, then you know what it's like to be frustrated for long periods of time. If you haven't and you want to try, welcome to the club. The first time I ever heard about it, I saw a picture in a book and I tried for 2 years to figure out how to do it. This picture was terrible. It was before the times of Google and YouTube and all of that good stuff. I learned every single way to do it wrong, and I also figured out how to do it right. The main thing is you cannot start with the most difficult situation where you're going out and ripping sticks off trees and trying to make it happen. So before you get crazy and try to make your kit outside, go to a hardware store, and that's where it all starts. There's 4 main parts to your bow drill. You have your bow, your handhold, your fireboard, and your spindle. You're gonna make your spindle and your fireboard out of the nice cedar board that you got at Home Depot. Make sure that you're getting the sapwood, not the heartwood. The heartwood's too hard. For your handhold, you can use a lot of different things, but with training wheels, you wanna use a rock, and you cut out a lot of variables. You don't have to mess around with it. I get these bits that are used for stoneworking. These are for, I believe, marble. And they're just bits that I can drill into stone with. They have some for tile work, depending on what rock you're using. They may or may not be good enough, but these are just diamond bits for using on marble. Drilling a hole into a rock that fits my hand well. So I walk around, I find a rock that I like how it fits. My hand kind of can wrap around it. And then I'm drilling a hole as close to the center as I can. The hole is about the same size as my fingertip. It's like I took my finger and pressed it into a piece of clay, but instead of clay, it's rock. And instead of my finger, it's a really crazy diamond bit. For your bow, you want to find a branch that is not so dead and decrepit that it's gonna break when you put a little bit of tension on it. You want it to be fairly thin but strong, and you want it to go from about your armpit to your fingertips. You're making this kit for your body, so using your body mechanics to your advantage is the best thing to do. One of the biggest things I'll talk about is string tension, so the way you set up your bow is really important. I like to get a drill and just drill through. I drill through the end, that way I don't have to find a forked stick, I can just drill through. And then I use P-cord as my string. It's really tough, it will stand up the test of time and bow drill in ways that other string won't. I also make 3 other holes in the handle part of the bow. So I make 3 holes and then I'm lacing the string up and down through those holes. I like to find a stick that has a slight curve in it, but don't look for one that's shaped like a D. You want it to be fairly straight with just a little bit of the bend, so that when you have tension on it, it creates a little bit of space there in between the string and the stick. When you go to your hardware store, find a cedar plank that's about 1 inch thick. It's gonna be really long. You wanna cut it into about 8 to 12 inch sections. And you are going to have to split this, but you're gonna get your fireboard and your spindle out of this. You want to avoid getting pieces that have lots of knots in them. The fewer knots, the better. You're gonna have to deal with some, but ideally, your piece doesn't have knots in it. You wanna make sure that you're getting the sapwood and not the heartwood. It's a little bit softer, but most of the cedar that you have in stores, you're gonna be able to tell. I like to use the thumbnail test. If you press your thumbnail into it and it leaves a mark, then it's good. You want to split this wood so that you have a piece for your spindle that you're going to carve and a piece for your fireboard. So I take another piece of wood, and after placing my knife where I want that split to be, I bang on the back of it. And now I have a piece for my fireboard and my spindle. There's no such thing as a knife that's the best for every task, and when I'm carving, I really like a particular knife. I like to look for a knife with a Scandi grind, which means it's really thick, but it comes to has a pretty steep angle, so it kind of acts as a wedge as well as a slicer. And that is gonna make your life so much easier. To carve the spindle, you want to start by using not only a push, but a slice. So you're basically looking at it and you're taking off any sides that aren't round. You don't want to lose the material from the sides that are already flat, and you just want to take away the corners to make it round. And using that push slice method, I kind of pull with this hand a little bit too. I start at one end and I just take the corners off. And you should be getting these really big pieces off. You keep getting those corners off, you flip it around and you start from the other side. And you're trying to make it as round as possible the entire way. You want it round and straight. You want your spindle to be about as long as from your pinky to your thumb when it's spread out like that. And you want your fireboard to be about the same thickness as your spindle, which is about the same width as your thumb, or slightly bigger if you have a small thumb like me. Once you have your spindle whittled down to a cylinder, you are going to carve both ends. One end, you want to carve a really sharp point. It's going to look like a vampire spike. And the other end, you're going to make almost flat with a little bumped up nipple on top. I'll show you what that looks like. So for the vampire spike end, you're taking a more dramatic angle. So sometimes I'll even take my knife and spin this under it so I know where I'm starting to carve from. I'll just carve that down into a spike. You want to make sure that the point of your spike is in the center of your spindle. So that end is finished, and you flip it around to your other end. The method for making it flat, you're kind of putting it right near the end and you're pushing it forward while slicing it a little bit. You're flipping your wrist like you were on a motorcycle at the very end. So it's a push, a little bit of a slice, and that little twist. And I use my thumb to press against the back of the knife. And I go all the way around a bunch of times. You are ready to start using your bow drill. But first, you need to make a tinder bundle. So I take jute, which you should also pick up at your local hardware store. And you're basically taking this natural fiber and you're deconstructing it. You're left with just the fiber. And it becomes this really fluffy, light thing that you eventually pull apart so many, you have this really nice, big, bird's nest looking tinder bundle. And then you want to make a little kind of hole in the center. And this is basically so that you're going to have a place to put your coal when you get one. You don't want to forget to do this because the last thing you want to do is be running around looking for this when you actually have your coal. There's a limited amount of time it's going to stay alive. So this is important to do beforehand. This will all make sense in a minute. If you're lucky enough to have it snowing when you're bow drilling, I would recommend putting it in your pocket to keep it dry. You want this to be really dry. You can stick it inside your shirt even if it is a little bit damp, and your body heat will help to dry it out, but don't let that get wet because that's where your coal is going. Fine tune the nipple. And you want to be pretty small. That's actually going to burn off as you're drilling. It's just to get your hole started. Now you're ready to start your hole. So you're not carving this hole out, you're actually going to burn it in so that it's exactly the same size as your spindle. You want it to be about a 1/4 inch or so from the edge, about half the width of your spindle from the edge. And I place it there and I just push and turn a little bit so that I make kind of a mark. And then I take my knife and I just twist with the tip to make a little divot that is gonna fit my nipple in it. That's as much knife work as you have to do. It's not really gonna stay in there, but it wants to. You're gonna take your bow and you want the string to be on the inside So I'm doing it right-handed, I'm right-handed. If you're doing it left-handed, you're probably used to everything being backwards, so everything will be backwards. But for a right-handed person, sorry left-handed people, I do love you. You're taking the vampire spike and you're having it up, placing it down over this string, wrapping it once around and pulling it up. It, for some reason, is a really complicated part for people, but it's not that hard. You just want that string wrapped once and you want your vampire spike facing up at the end of this. And that's about the level of tension you want. You want to kind of have to click it into place. If it's too loose, you're gonna need to tighten it. And if you really have to muscle it and force it, it might be a little too tight. But you want it to have enough tension that it's a little difficult to kind of pull it into place. I like to do it towards the end of my bow so that I can use this finger as a trigger finger to hold it in place while I'm getting the rest of my stuff set up. You are going to then come up into the bow drilling position. So you're gonna have one knee down on the ground and your other leg up at a 90-degree angle. Really helps when you have lovely knee pads in your pants like these from Matt, which are my new favorite bow drilling leggings. You're taking your fireboard. You wanna find that little dent you made, and you wanna bring your foot with the arch of your foot on that fireboard. And then you wanna look at your other knee, and you want your knee behind your heel of your foot, and then your other foot is gonna be kicked out to kind of make a little kickstand. So you make a tripod. That's gonna give you stability. Your bow's still in your right hand, and you're gonna lean forward, put your chest on your knee. And that way, your spindle's gonna fit right here. With your left hand, when you make a bend in your wrist, you kind of have this nice little angle there. That fits perfectly into your shin. And this is really important because it's gonna give this hand stability. It's easy when you're well-fed and full of energy and literally in your backyard. But when you're out in any different situation, if you don't get these body mechanics right from the start, it's gonna cause all kinds of trouble. So you might be able to muscle it without having perfect form. I really recommend training perfect form from the beginning. It's just gonna make everything easier. So really find that place where your hand is locked in. Then grab your handhold, you're gonna have that indent down and lock in. Bring your spindle down, put it in that little divot, and then this vampire spike goes in that fingerprint hole that you made. At this point, you should be able to let go of your bow and it's still gonna stay there. You wanna be putting downward pressure on this hand, and I do that by kind of just leaning down into my knee, but also through my hand and just really focusing on that downward pressure. I hold the handle of my bow and I hold that string so that I keep that same tension on. You want your bow to stay parallel to the ground. You don't want it to be moving up and down. You want it to really just stay parallel. So in order to do that, you kind of have to point your wrist and then flex it as you pull back, but just watch your bow and try to keep it parallel. I'm taking care to go from the very end of my bow to the other end. I'm using the whole string. And you're gonna see smoke, but don't get excited because you're just drilling in your hole. I'm gonna stop when I've kind of gotten a hole that's deep enough to be the whole circumference of my spindle. And then it's time to carve again, but first, I like saving all this dust. It's really flammable. And I put it right in the center of my tinder bundle. Because I worked hard for that and I don't want to waste it. I want to carve this V-shaped notch now. And you want the notch to be about 1/8 of the circle. So if it was a pizza, I wish I had pizza right now, it would be 1/8 of the pie. You want the tip of it to come just shy of the center of that circle. And the way you carve that is by bisecting that circle. And then bring your knife to the edge and make a line. And that's gonna be the center of your notch. I take my knife and I cut in while holding that wood at a 45-degree angle, and I cut a little V, and then I go to the other side, and I cut a little V, and I'm basically gonna keep cutting little V's, and that'll get bigger and bigger, and use the angle to your advantage. It's easier to cut because there's less mass of wood when you hold it like that than if you were to just try cutting straight into it. So I've cut it out until it kind of looks like an hourglass shape, and then I'm cutting that middle part out because I've created angles that I'm now cutting on. So you see it's already started to get that notch shape. I just have to keep going in further. As I was carving, my V migrated a little bit more off to this side than in the center. So I'm gonna compensate by focusing on this other side. So I have my notch all carved out on my fireboard, and I'm ready to start going for the gold. So I basically have my tinder bundle here that I am making sure I put aside. It's snowing. I don't want it to get wet, but there's kind of just a little bit it's gonna have to deal with. Try to do it when it's not snowing. All right, that's sitting there where I'm not gonna knock it down or hit it with my bow. Getting back into that position. The only difference is this time, I'm gonna take a tiny little thin piece of cardboard and I'm gonna put it underneath that notch. And I don't wanna move it from start to finish, even if I have to take breaks. You're basically gonna be collecting dust that's falling out into that notch. The dust is formed from the friction of the wood on wood action. And as the dust collects down in that little notch, you are going to have it all be kind of squeezed together from one side, but getting oxygen from the other. It's gonna increase in temperature from the heat you're making with that friction, and it's gonna reach a temperature where it's hot enough to spontaneously form a little coal in that pile of dust. So it's hard to tell when you're first starting out. The quality of the smoke will eventually change so that you can tell you have a coal, but just go for as long as you can if you're in doubt. If you're in doubt, just keep going. It's not gonna hurt it to keep going. You're gonna put that piece of cardboard right underneath your notch. You wanna, when you set up and when you continue to bow, make sure that this hand doesn't move. So if you're moving it, your spindle is gonna end up popping out of your hole. And what you wanna do is just keep it straight up and down. So this should be perpendicular with the ground. It should be at a 90-degree angle, not canted forward, canted to the sides, straight up and down and consistent. You don't want it wiggling all over the place. Starting out slow, then speeding up a little bit, but making sure I'm using that string from tip to tip. You'll see this coal that I've made. It's kind of starting to fall out, but I start fanning it right away. This not only gives me time to catch my breath, but that coal is growing. So I'll pull that away gently, and I'll just keep fanning it. You'll see this middle part's kind of starting to turn black, and there it is. You can see it burning. If you want to extend your coal a little bit, you can add some of that dust. Well, you grab your tinder bundle. You're gonna take that piece of cardboard and dump that coal and all the dust right to the center of it. Then you're gonna take your fingertips and squeeze together gently. You wanna start blowing pretty quickly. But squeeze together and really push that around, but you wanna still be able to see it, don't smother it. And you're giving it oxygen. You're gonna lift it above your head so that you don't get that smoke in your face. You're gonna blow from beneath. Long breaths and as much air as you can. And then I'll into fire. Oh yeah, and you have to put it in your fire before it burns. Oh God. multitasking. Forgot what I was doing. Ta-da! See, sometimes it even works. The three variables you're working with are speed, pressure, and duration. And you can have more of one, less of another, but you need a certain amount of all of those things. So when in doubt, press down harder on your handhold, go faster with your bow, or go for longer. There could be a whole entire other episode on troubleshooting the bow drill, but to give you that to start out with, if you play around with those three things, you should be in pretty good shape. The better form you have, the easier it's going to be. And when you're not talking during it, it's a lot easier and you won't even almost set yourself on fire. So there's that. But start with your training wheels, then you can get crazy with it. I used to start fires on the streets of cities for money when I was a traveling hobo back in the day. I'd light someone's cigarette for $5. So you know what, if you're ever down and out, it's a great party trick to have fun with, show off to your friends, even if you're just using it in your backyard. Really makes you appreciate one of these. A little harder. Yeah!
Oh, thank you. Damn, $100 bills just fall. You're going around. How you doing, Lola? Oh, did you see